big show. Matt Kahn is in the house. Matt Kahn, the one, the only author, spiritual teacher. He's going to come talk to us about love. Going to talk to us about loving what is. We're going to have a great conversation. I'm super excited. He's got a new book out, by the way. He's already in the house, and Matt, you sent the request. You're better at this than you thought.
Hey!
Deja vu.
It's like it seems like almost yesterday.
How have you been?
Transformed.
If you're looking to transform, I got a great book for you.
I keep hearing about this book. I may need, honest to God, the excitement for the book is so incredible. I may need to sit down this weekend and read it myself.
Do you know what's in it? Do you go back and ever read your books?
Sometimes I'll skim my books. I'll open up to a random page and just kind of familiarize myself. Sometimes I'll go back and watch an old YouTube video of mine. And what's really funny is I'll go back and I'll watch, and I'm watching myself on screen saying things that I literally don't remember saying. And then I'm watching me going, I know that's me, but that's awesome. So it's so funny to be detached and such a fan of this work, or I'll read something and go, yeah, that's it.
I don't know where some of the stuff that you say comes from,
right?
But it's amazing. And guys, we're talking to Matt Kahn. Or if you're not following Matt, click there. You gotta go to the link in his bio to get his check out his webpage. He's got a brand new book out and everything too. We're gonna just have fun. We're gonna talk about spirituality. We're gonna talk about the power of love. We're gonna talk about healing, transformative healing process, going through the awakening process, and we're going to take your questions. So you got questions, put them in the question bubble too. We're going to deal with that. So, wow. Well, Matt, so yes. Where do we begin? Because we just spoke yesterday, but I think we're going to also share this with the people. So I want to kind of start to maybe like review a little what we did yesterday about going over your background again, and just kind of like tell us a little bit about yourself and how we got to where we are here today.
Well, the funny thing about doing something over again, like a take two, is like it gives the chance to say things differently. And
yeah,
I think that, I often talk about my story of my out-of-body experience where I went to heaven when I was 8. I talk about being an empath and feeling like I can't separate my feelings from other people's experiences and how codependent that really made me in my life. But I think also what I think is really relevant, and I think nearly every viewer will resonate with this, is that my earliest memory in life that I can remember, and I don't remember what age I was, I remember looking at the world from a distance, not understanding it, not knowing where I was, what any of this is. And I just felt this weird sensation of like, I feel like a visitor, an invisible presence in a strange world. And I see all these people who are acclimated and they seem to connect and resonate. And I remember there was this pull of, I got to figure out a way to fit in. And my deepest wound when I was from an early age was feeling invisible. And throughout my life, what I've uncovered through many awakenings and revelations, and of course, what I help other people heal in themselves, among many things, is this feeling of invisibility. Whether you feel invisible to a family that can't see you, whether you feel overlooked by a partner, whether you feel as if you give and your giving is not reciprocated. The feeling of invisibility is a very common symptom as we go through the awakening of consciousness, because invisible or unworthy or irrelevant is often how the ego misinterprets our formless eternal presence. And what I have found throughout my life and through all my teachings, the more we love ourselves, the more we go from invisibility to a deeper state of invincibility. And so loving ourselves helps us heal the wound of feeling invisible, when in fact we are the formless witness within the body of all of our experiences.
Beautiful. And, you know, one of the things that is beautiful, the idea that you talked about, because in the spiritual journey,
Yeah.
there's a lot of talk about ego and, you know, not loving the ego and getting
Right.
rid of the ego. And you really bring it into loving the ego and accepting the ego. You know, can you talk a little bit more to that? Because I think that's such a profound point where sometimes it could really get people lost in circles when they're, you know, at war with themselves.
Yeah, I think if we think of it from a very kind of grounded familial kind of dynamic, you know, if you're a little brother or sister, or you're a brother and sister and you have a new sibling, often it's like, this is the person that took all the attention from me. I want to get rid of this little one. And we honestly have, it's very common in the spiritual journey to have an adversarial relationship with the ego. But if instead of relating to the ego like the new child that gets all the attention, if we relate to it like a parent would relate to a child, we find that all the ways in which the ego acts out, gets inflated, develops a hunger for control, and of course, in a very insidious level, hides its pain or takes out its unprocessed pain on other people. And of course, that's a very serious matter. But I think what the conversation shift is in this new paradigm is, yes, we can condemn all the inequities and imbalances of ego consciousness, but from a state of love, can we see that victimhood, whether you are a victim or a predator, is a cry for wholeness. It's a crying out in an emotional crisis. And so we can either kind of resolve this from a judgmental perspective and say we condemn the ego and get rid of it. And I have actually found that most spiritual paths and traditions that are so hell-bent on getting rid of the ego are often the communities where the ego lurks the most insidiously in the most clever costumes. So I feel like this conversation we're having about love is not one where we are not putting love on the ego as a way of kind of putting potpourri on a condition that needs to be healed, nor are we judging it and meeting the ego's wounds with more wounds that feed it with the hunger of control. What we're actually doing is we're saying, this is the part of me whose needs have been met the least, and it acts out through negative self-talk. It acts out through reactive emotional patterning. It acts out through judgment because it's actually begging for the love that I have not learned to give myself. And so as we love ourselves more, not less, we find our nervous systems regulate. Our inner dialogue starts to silence. Our heart begins to open. We feel safe in the body. And instead of being an embodiment of the conditions of our family, we start to be a living expression of source and form. So I really think that if we looked at the world like a giant village and we said, if some of our villagers are acting out, let's get together as a community and let's bring support to a crisis. Let's all look at the imbalances of ego as an emotional, spiritual crisis that only our love can resolve.
You know, I've heard about stories in certain villages where if somebody was caught stealing or doing something bad, they would put the person in the center of the circle and go around and say things that they loved about the person. And it just seems like, you know, that it's the power of love. And I know that's the foundation of your, there's a lot of different facets and teachings in the spiritual world, whether it's through finding peace or truth in different areas. And of course, you touch on all of those things, but it seems to me that the power of love, the theme of love has always been would you say it's your teacher? And how did you get, how did you find love as the path for you and also the teaching for you as well?
Well, you know, when I had my out-of-body experience when I was 8, you know, that was a big awakening for me, and that opened up a big spiritual reality for me, sure. And of course, I felt love from my family, although it came from a lot of inconsistent feedback, because my parents would be loving, and then when they got triggered, they'd be very different versions of themselves. And that was very confusing for me. In fact, you know, in the book, I tell the story of my mom was my greatest fan and defender. And my mom was like Judge Judy. She was 5 foot tall and no one messed with my mom. Everyone was scared of my mom. And if there was an issue, she would step in, you know, to defend me. But the one thing my mom could never protect me from was her. And so what I found in my life, and if I juxtapose that to like being a sixth grader, right? Sixth grade, fifth grade, you're kind of in this innocent, like, hey, we're kids. Sixth grade, right? If we all remember the first day of sixth grade, oh my God, we're now in the big pool. We have lockers. There's popularity and there's all these intensities. And from a very early age, I was so afraid of being rejected that I worked very hard to be very popular at a young age because I was just afraid of being less than. And I was afraid of replicating at school some of the ways I was treated at home. And what I found was spontaneously, and again, it could have been my experience at 8, just integrating. But what I found was, and this happened so spontaneously because at that age, I couldn't have grokked it like I can share it with you. But I found that if I made the choice to be nicer to someone, even if I was nicer to them than they were to me, my body was filled with the exact well-being I was waiting for people to give me by validating and approving of me. And I somehow started to make this shift slowly but surely that I felt more whole just being nice, polite, supporting people's journeys instead of holding myself back and waiting for every single person to give me permission to exist. So it was very spontaneous. I certainly can't take credit for the realization, but it just became this really deep realization that serving other people's journeys, even just being polite and enthusiastic and supportive, gave me the feeling of being accepted without waiting for someone's approval. And even if someone couldn't match what I gave them, the power of what was coming through me was fulfilling me before it even landed in their heart. And it started to really change the way I thought and interacted in time and space. And it happened at a really young age, but it took me, 40 some odd years to process and realize this.
This is amazing conversation. I so much I want to ask you.
Yeah.
And so guys, Matt Kahn, there's a lot of new people coming in. And follow Matt here, but also go to the link in his bio if you want to check out his new book. I have a personal mission. I want to get Matt, please show us again. Let me screenshot that. That's okay. You guys screenshot this, right? Actually do it one more time. Screenshot it, guys. Screenshot it. Put it on your stories, please.
Great.
So mattcahn.org/love. Is that how we get to your new book too?
Yeah, if you go to mattcahn.org/love, you can order the book and you can fill out a form after you order the book, and we send you a free instant access to the feature-length documentary Healed by Love that we made as a bonus offer for the book. And so the documentary was inspired by the book, and it's not a documentary necessarily about healing. It's a documentary that actually heals you as you watch it. It's a living, breathing transmission of healing as you take a journey of people that do sessions with me, and we follow their journey as they spend time with me. And literally they spend 20 to 45 minutes with me. And then I gave them some assignments to integrate what we worked on, and we filmed their transformation. And the movie also shows the radical healing I went through over the last 3 years as well. And it's something I'm extraordinarily proud of and happy to share with the world.
When I first heard you going through your tough times,
yeah,
and I know the Matt Kahn, the words that you've said, even put to music, and just and again, I'm conscious. I want to be conscious of my pandering here, but it's just the idea that honestly, you are truly channeling something.
Yes,
I'm glad that you have the capacity and the education and the ability to articulate, which I think is a beautiful combination. that you're truly transforming something, and then you can articulate it. So kudos to your parents through good education, good schooling, whatever it was, because that combination of actual intelligence and then the true intelligence coming together is
Yes.
a beautiful gift to humanity here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so with your what you have gone through and taught, and I've learned so much from you over the decade
Yep.
or so, and you know what though is interesting is because when you went through your own personal suffering recently, it's like, well, Matt Kahn suffers still, and
Yeah.
he watches UFC, and
Yeah.
so I think a lot of people are curious about how do you feel, and yet there's something yet you got
Yeah.
that maybe other people say I don't have,
Sure.
and yet yes, you know where I'm
Question I
going with
love
this,
that
so
you
I'd love
asked
to hear.
about my experience of, okay. So I've had some radical awakenings throughout my life. I've received what's called a Shakti pot, 2 of them, which a Shakti pot is when light shoots out of someone's third eye and hits you, boom. And I've had this experience of having what felt like the entire history of my life ooze out of my ears. One Shakti pot that happened, literally, I heard a gunshot and I thought there was a gunshot in my neighborhood. And it turned out it was in my head. And I just felt this liquid nectar, like oozing warm liquid ooze out of my ears. And I literally had just no sense of myself with any boundaries and any sense of identity. And so that integrated. After that experience, I went through a 2-year process where I could do intuitive readings. But aside from intuitive readings, I would sit on my couch wrapped in a blanket, shaking and feeling like I was about to die. And I died every day for 2 years. And there would even be there would be no one there who's dying, and I would still die. And eventually what happened was I settled into an identity as the eternal witness, and I would witness and experience death, but I was never the one dying. And so I went, and so that helped wake up in me what's called samadhi, which is a living, abiding state of consciousness, a sustained level of consciousness. Like some people will go into expansion, right? They'll chant, they'll meditate, and they'll feel that, and then it will kind of go back down. Samadhi is when it opens up and it stays there. So I started teaching, transmitting, channeling information, which my information comes from what's called the Akashic Records. And it's all the information from each person's soul record. And I do it to help integrate, clear, and activate, and to really further people's evolution in a very energetic way. And so I'm doing all this work, and then I go through a series of experiences. Both my parents pass away within a year of each other. I was in a relationship with a very incredible person, and she and I are close friends, and I thought it was my wife, and it wasn't meant to be. But for some reason, because that relationship felt like the fulfillment of a fantasy I had since I was about 12 years old, which since I was 12 years old, I've been wondering who and where my wife is. And it all kind of catalyzed and created this implosion in me. And the benefit of my work and my journey is I have never really read about paths. I've only intuited information and based it on my actual experiences. And so I never knew how things were or weren't supposed to be. There was no sense of, I'm already awake, why am I in pain, or this is wrong. I just kind of went with it. And what I started to realize by going through the deepest Shakespearean level of despair, and I will say, to make this even more radical, I was going through the deepest pain in my life and in samadhi bliss simultaneously, which is called it's called a super state. Super state is when you experience 2 opposing forces, or I've experienced on occasions 4 opposing forces at the same time. And so here I am going through the deepest pain in my life, talking to my friends about it, and yet I'm totally fine. And people couldn't understand it, like, what do you mean? And what was happening was this very human death or implosion was creating space for the ego that had disappeared. And, in a lot of spiritual journeys, they think, oh, ego disappears, throw a party, the wicked witch is dead. But the ego goes into the ether. It goes through a transformational process The ego is then reborn as what we call the soul, and then it makes its way back into your body. And so this whole healing journey was my ego or my soul reintegrating back into the cellular body of my physical form. And as a result, the best way I can describe it, because I've always felt like a loving person, and I've always had a very expanded level of consciousness and access to this kind of information at will. But based on this deeply transformative journey I've gone through, the greatest adjective I can say that I finally feel is I feel real. Everything for 15 years was surreal. It was like a dream state. It was like a movie.
Wow.
Is the world even real? And people talk about that, but that's a stage of awakening when you actually complete the journey, and there's so many stages to it. You actually feel real, and then the I am actually clicks and it has meaning, like, oh, I am, I now know what this means. It's not an esoteric I am, it's a tangible I am. So this whole journey for me was the journey of the truth that had woke up in me, now catalyzing and becoming real within itself.
Wow. And
Powerful.
that's extremely powerful. And it's almost like it is beyond the mind in essence.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think true recognition is the true awakening. And when you first start to have the awakening, you realize
Yeah.
it was the mind, you're trying to have the mind's version of awakening. And then
Right.
when you truly awaken, you reflect back and say, oh, this was trying to awaken. That doesn't happen, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
a lot of the journey, even if we talk about the mind or the ego trying to be the one in charge of forgiveness, the mind or the ego trying to be the one in charge of being more loving, the mind or the ego trying to be in charge of how high vibe we are. And one of the reasons I wrote All for Love, the transformative power of holding space, is to help people actually experience, integrate, and embody all these tangible realities, but not from their mind or ego, but as an actual lived experience. And literally the energy in this book brings to life these realities as people are reading it. It's something that I don't know how I do what I do, but I'm so blessed that I was the space that was chosen for all this to be channeled through.
And you know what? I got through a majority of the book. I binged it in the last couple of days, guys. It's great. It's not the first book. And the funny thing, one of my closest people in my life, she sent me a snapshot. She said, my book arrived, or is arriving soon, or something. And I said, oh, wow. And she goes, she knows, Matt Kahn was really something that brought our journey together. I gave her a book, and it transformed her life years ago. And so it's surreal, to use that word again, for me to be here with you when you've had such a big impact in my life. And I'm just grateful to help. My goal here is to not just here in general, but in Instagram and life, is like, what is my purpose? is awakening is also, and so to spend time with you, to spread these messages. And your book, I'm going to look over here, because All for Love, the Transformative Power of Holding Space is the name of this book. And I really want to get into the power of holding space, but the tangibility of, like, you make this so practical for like people to, like, literally, no matter what stage you're at in a spiritual journey, and don't even call it spiritual. It's just, are you healing? Do you want the best version? Do you want to be the best listener? Do you want to just self-improvement? It kind of encapsulates all of these different areas. So with that being said, could you emphasize the power of the transformative power of holding space? What is it about holding space?
Well, I think that in order to distill, or to really focus on holding space, I think that we can give love a really different meaning. Like, I know a lot of times people think of love and we can confuse it with arousal, right? We think that when I'm attracted to someone and I feel arousal, that could be a moment of love. And to be honest, if we think of it from a tantric perspective, most human beings only experience the sudden opening of their root chakra when they are sexually aroused. So there's a lot of ways in which we confuse love with arousal. What I like to say, as far as love as a spiritual love, that love is an act of service. And a lot of us act from a place of service. We then hope other people will reciprocate, and we get resentful when they don't. So holding space is really how to embody love and transmit love as an act of service with our words and our actions, to become aware of the fact that the majority of people who are acting unconsciously, impolitely, or rudely are on incredibly intense healing journeys and have no idea they are or what it even means, and haven't even developed the awareness or the value to care about what transformation is happening within us. So how do we as spiritual beings learn to interact with people from an awareness that we're all on an incredible healing journey? We're all participating in the awakening of consciousness. And how do we open our hearts without getting our feelings hurt every 2 seconds? How do we connect with people without waiting for other people to give us what we give them? And more importantly, how do we act from an empowered place so that we're not just talking about love as an ideology, we're not just talking about love as the highest vibration, but we're actually allowing love to be the decider of what we say and how we respond and how we really move through an ever divided world that we are all participating in uniting as one.
We all, in essence, we can say we know, of course we know what love is, and at the same time you just clarified like the differences of a feeling of love or an emotional, sensual feeling of love, and then love is an action, love as there's so many agape type love, you know, so it's like what is love?
Well, you know, I don't mean to give you a Taoist or a Zen answer, but in order to know what is love, and this will be a nice little fun self-inquiry, which a lot of times the most potent questions don't give us answers. They stop the questioner spontaneously. So sometimes if we were to explore what is love, and I did this at a retreat I led, and I said, in order to know what love is, we have to question where love isn't. We can answer what love isn't, but where isn't love? And can we start to actually see that love may not be the force that creates violence and separation and discord, but as we start to become more psychically advanced, as we become more energetically sensitive, we start to notice the presence of oneness or love as actually the fabric through which the entire universe and all worlds are molded out of. What we may think, what is love?
What is not love?
What isn't love? Where isn't love? And what we start to realize is that our human interpretation is, most people think love is the label we give to highly preferable experiences.
Yes.
And what and not even just what I've read in a book, because I just channel everything. And I also, not only am I channeling, but I'm also teaching what I experience in the moment I'm channeling. So as I talk, I'm talking from the actual experience of what I'm describing, which is how the energy is alive. But what I experience in every moment is that love is the actual fabric of reality, that our entire world is molded out of love and unity as we are still human beings figuring out that the world is made of unity, and our invitation is to merge into the unity, so to bring this loving planet of oneness into conscious actualized form. And that's what we're really going through as a planet, is the planet, the universe is becoming conscious of itself at a higher level, and it's allowing the higher consciousness to not remain in the ether, but all of the intelligence of heaven to come alive on the earth plane. So it literally is the merging of heaven and earth, and the journey we take in bridging heaven and earth sometimes can feel like hell.
The birthing process.
That's right.
Wow. Guys, and Matt goes into a lot of these principles, the healing process, personal spiritual growth process in his book. I just want to let people know about this because sure. I want people to know because your work is profound. And if I truly want to spread as much love and awakening as possible, I want to I want people to know about it. So Matt Kahn, KAHN.org. Well, easiest, just click here and go to the link in his bio, and you can find his website. But his book is just being launched. I really want to get this. I want to get it out to the world, and if we can get you on the bestsellers list, boom! Like let's get you on all the main TV shows, and I know you got some exciting things in the works coming up. So coming back to this principle of love, if we can, you can almost say that everything is love, right? And in essence, like when somebody is cold to you, it's a form of self-protection or self-love, right? So you could, if two people are fighting and screaming at each other, they just desperately want that person to hear them or to be heard. So again, a form of self-love or a form of externalizing love, but it mirrors, it masks itself in something called anger or frustration, which is also a form of love, right? So would you say it's fair to say that everything is ultimately love and it's more just our interpretation of it?
What I would say with respect to the traumas a lot of people endure and a lot of unconscionable actions that people perpetrate against others, like men, women, children, and even animals.
Yeah.
What I would say is that love, I would say that, so on a quantum level, everything is love. But on a quantum level, we're not seeing individual ego characters either connecting or abusing each other. So on a quantum level, that's a true statement. But on a form level, on a planetary level, on a personal level, love is the theme within every experience. And what I would say to really detail that is that positive experiences tend to be the spectrum of an emerging love, and destructive, violent, traumatic experience or abuses are the way people act from a fear of love. So when people are abusing other people, whether it's judgment, whether it's physical violence, whether it's gun violence, or whether it's sexual assault, the people that are the perpetrators are the most afraid of intimacy, because in their most intimate vulnerability, they were most likely mistreated, abandoned, or taken advantage of themselves. So a lot of the energy in perpetrators comes from a fear of surrendering to a love that they are misunderstanding with how they were traumatized, neglected, and abused. So when we bring love to the heart of a victim or a perpetrator, we are making safe the ability for us to expand and to experience the spectrum of love. But in order for someone to awaken the spectrum of love, they have to go through an experience of overcoming their fear of love. And whether that's something, an experience people have in this lifetime over many lifetimes, I would say that the theme is always love, that the greatest acts of inspiration is a spectrum of love and action. And the most insidious cruelties we see in the world is how desperately unconsciousness is hiding from the love and intimacy it either is afraid of being hurt by, it doesn't feel worthy enough to receive, or feels too ashamed to face directly. And so as we love ourselves, we allow all of our unhealed parts, all of our unprocessed pains to really be integrated and healed, so that we as a planet can hold space for fear to see itself in the mirror of consciousness, to face its own shadow, to deal with the regret and despair of how it acted when completely unconscious, and to go through a transformational journey so that we as a planet no longer have to live in a world where anyone can be harmed or mistreated. And that's a part of my life mission, to make sure for that every breath I am here, I am participating in making this planet a safe place for all inhabitants and future generations.